global climate change as we pass tipping point after tipping point. We did a video on this, which you can see at lasthours.org, about the methane tipping point, methane cloth rates in the ocean. And Guy McPherson has been writing about this and these sorts of issues for quite some time. It seems like since 2006 anyway. And is doing a bit of a speaking tour right now. He's got a new book out. He's a professor emeritus of natural resources and ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Arizona. He's a contributor to what I find one of the most interesting blogs on climate change. It is arctic-news.blogspot.com. And his website is Guy McPherson, McPherson.com. Guy, welcome to the Dr. McPherson, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us.
Call me Guy.
Okay. Guy, you, in several recent speeches, have suggested that we have passed so many tipping points on the road toward irreversible global climate change that we're now in a state of irreversible global climate change that's going to bite us in the butt, presumably within the lifetime of people alive today. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I think that's right. And at Nature Bats Last, my own website, I simply collate, synthesize, integrate, and summarize the information put out by other scientists. I left active service at the University of Arizona about 5 years ago, and so I haven't had the infrastructure and especially the funding to do primary science since then. So since I left, I have been connecting the dots and putting together the information put out by other people. That information includes, at this point, 31 self-reinforcing feedback loops, 29 of which appear to be irreversible at temporal spans relevant to the human experience. And the hits keep coming. We're up to 19 as recently as last August when I presented in Amsterdam, and now we're at 31. So there's no slowing this ship down.
And these self-reinforcing feedback loops include things like what?
Like methane hydrates bubbling out of the Arctic Ocean. That was the first one reported in the refereed journal literature, reported in Science in March 2010. And that's a self-reinforcing feedback loop because as the methane bubbles out, the atmosphere gets warmer because methane is such a strong greenhouse gas. And as it gets warmer, it causes the methane to bubble out even faster. Mm-hmm. And so other examples include the melting of the Arctic ice, for example. The ice serves as a profound source of reflectance or albedo, and you remove that ice and suddenly the energy is going into the dark ocean instead of being reflected out by the white ice. So we have warm Atlantic water, we have methane coming out of the Arctic Ocean, we have methane coming out of the Siberian region, and in fact throughout the world's boreal forests at this point as permafrost gets transformed into permamelt. We have peat in the world's boreal forest decomposing at an astonishing rate, contributing to warming, drying, therefore accelerating the decomposition of that peat, and so on.
Releasing methane and carbon dioxide.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So and those are the big two. There's several other greenhouse gases, and if we put them all together, we're at about 480 parts per million equivalent of CO2. Right now in the atmosphere. And of course, before the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we were at about 280 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and less than 700 parts per billion methane. So the equivalent was considerably less than 300 parts per million.
What is this
CO2 equivalent?
What does this mean for our children?
We are experiencing a warmed and warming planet. It's difficult for me to imagine there will be habitat for human beings in the not too distant future. Consider, for example, that methane leaking out of the Arctic Ocean or bubbling out of the Arctic Ocean. That one feedback alone contributes so greatly to planetary warming that incorporating just that single feedback indicates that it can be as warm as 10°C warmer than baseline by 2040. And we've never had humans on a planet more than 3.5°C above baseline.
So you're predicting the end of humanity.
Yes.
So
and we're taking a lot of other species down with us.
Within the lifetime of our children and maybe even you and me, should we live that long.
Yes. Yes,
so,
I had every ambition of living until 2030 or 2040.
Yeah.
In fact, most people don't leave their academic university jobs until they're about 70.
Right.
I'll be 70 in 2030. I'm pretty sure there won't be habitat for humans where I live at that point.
So what do we do about this?
I frequently give relatively little advice about what we can do because it appears that so many of those self-reinforcing feedback loops are irreversible at temporal spans relevant to the human experience.
Now, didn't the IPCC just say, we've got a real problem here, and it may be irreversible unless we go to geoengineering?
Yes, in fact, that's exactly what they say in a report leaked from their fifth assessment. A report that, well, here's the exact quote from New Scientist at newscientist.com. Hardly a sky is falling kind of organization. Here's how they open. Global warming is irreversible without massive geoengineering of the Earth's chemistry. This stark warning comes from the draft summary of the latest climate assessment by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That's the lead.
Right. Okay. We just have about a minute and a half left, Guy. I'd like to get through this. So we're screwed. I know you've been suggesting that we basically take a kind of Buddhist approach to this. You talked about our being in hospice, and let's talk about quality of life and let's improve things. But that said, I'm sure you're familiar with the famous bet between Paul Ehrlich and Julian Simon back in the 1970s, and how that worked out. Back in 2006, you were suggesting that by 2008, peak oil would be getting us. Could it be that human ingenuity can get us out of this, the way Julian Simon predicted?
It could be, though it would surprise me because it seems to me that it's human ingenuity that got us into this mess. We keep coming up with technological means to extract wealth, financial wealth, from the planet at tremendous cost.
What do you say to those who try to discredit you by suggesting that in 2006 you were arguing that by within a few years peak oil was going to get us?
I continue to be amazed that the system has held together as long as it has, and that's right. I was incorrect in my assessment of peak oil. In fact, that only made things worse. We've known since 2009, in a paper published in Climatic Change by Tim Garrett, that only complete collapse prevents runaway climate change.
So we should have, when the warnings about peak oil came along, we should have stopped using oil. Guy, I'm sorry, we have hard breaks on the show. The machine has started. Guy McPherson is still with us. Guy, I asked Danielle to call you back, and because I felt like that conversation was very incomplete, and this is a really big issue. And in fact, the question that I'd like to put out to my callers, to the people watching the show right now, is if you knew that the world was going to end, basically, that within 20, 25 years or less, that most of the Earth was going to become uninhabitable for human life, what would you do tomorrow? And let me put that question to you, Guy.
I think that's a great question, Tom. First of all, thanks for having me back on after the little disruption there. What would I do? I would try to ensure the longest possible run for non-human species. I think we're done. I think that as a teacher, I would continue to try to educate people about the dire straits we're in, and I would continue to try to educate people to live as if we're in hospice, to live as if our insignificant lives matter to us and those around us, to treat each other with respect and to go out with some dignity. Instead of grubbing for the last dollar, instead of planning for the future that never comes, let's live here now. Let's
Now,
live in this moment and
Morris,
be kind to those around us.
Morris Berman wrote a couple of really interesting books, but one in particular was very, very dark, in which he was basically predicting the end of civilization, not the end of humanity, but the end of civilization. And his solution in that book, and we had him on the show talking about this a couple of years ago, was that we should basically start monasteries. We should do what the monks did back during the Dark Ages and write down all the collected knowledge of humanity, because it's not going to, it's all now moved onto hard drives, and those are not going to survive the crash of industrial society. Might an alternative be, if you're actually predicting the end of the human race, that, biology is pretty unstoppable over time, and if anything, that's one of the big lessons of the previous 5 extinctions, that it's quite likely that at some point in the future, it might be hundreds of thousands of years or even millions of years, but at some point in the future, a life form as intelligent or more intelligent than us will evolve. Should we be coming up with technologies to leave behind our story and our cautionary tale?
Well, I think that's not a bad idea. I think that first we need to try to ensure that as many species as possible make it through the industrial civilization bottleneck. And that's what I'm working for. As Edward O. Wilson, a Harvard biologist, points out, it only requires about 10 million years after an extinction event, after a major extinction event, before we have a vibrant, verdant planet again. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm working for, is toward the long haul, towards the 10 million years and beyond out. Right. Will we ever see a species like ours arise again? Well, we don't know. Will we ever see Chinook salmon arise again if we cause their extinction? We don't know, but probably not. And so let's try to save the seeds, as it were, for the future, including as many species as we can possibly get through the industrial civilization bottleneck.
Now, one of the things that, kind of noodling this out causes me to think that there's a higher probability that we'll survive than, for example, the salmon, is that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that humans are the only species on Earth that has been able to create habitat under every microclimate, macroclimate that the planet has, from Eskimos to people living on the equator. And that adaptability, which comes out of our big brains, is an asset beyond just physical adaptability. Might that not? I mean, might it be that civilization will be gone and humanity as we know it will be gone, but our DNA will continue? And I mean, it looks like the last bottleneck, which was probably around 80,000 years ago, maybe 160,000 years ago, as few as 15, 20,000 humans survived. Now that they're doing the DNA studies on this stuff. Could we just be seeing another bottleneck, and a new iteration, a new incarnation, a new variety of Homo is going to emerge?
Could be. We don't know with great precision what the future holds, but it would surprise me. And it would surprise me because we're animals. We're human animals. We require habitat, most notably food. And if we've already seen phytoplankton in the ocean decline by 50% in the last few decades, at 0.85 C warming above baseline. When we get to 3 or 4 C above baseline, it's difficult for me to imagine we'll have a significant number of phytoplankton. That's the base of the marine food web. And so that's half our food. When we get to 3 or 4 C warming, it's difficult for me to imagine we'll have many land plants as well, especially given the rapidity with which we're approaching that 3 or 4 C rise. So without land plants, which form the basis for the terrestrial food web, and without phytoplankton in the ocean, I just don't see how we're going to feed ourselves, no matter how clever we are. I agree that we're clever. In fact, I think we chose the wrong name for ourselves. We're not Homo sapiens. Sapiens means wise. We're Homo calitus. Calitus means clever. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're really clever, and we've managed to paint ourselves into an incredible corner. And I just don't see much way out, even though we are incredibly adaptable. In fact, because we are incredibly adaptable, I don't see a way out with respect to the effectiveness with which we're destroying the living planet that we actually depend upon for our own survival.
Yeah. So you're just like dead serious about this. Forget 2100. This is going to happen in 20 years or 30 years or less, and it's going to be not just the end of civilization, but probably the end of humanity and most other large animals.
Yeah, it's difficult for me, given what I know about the evidence so far, it's difficult for me to imagine a way out of the monkey trap into which we've stuck our hand. So, no, I don't see a way out. It's 5 years ago now that Tim Garrett published that paper. It's 7 years ago that he wrote and submitted it. It says only complete collapse from an economic perspective prevents runaway greenhouse.
Right.
Since then, we've triggered those 31 self-reinforcing feedback loops.
Remarkable.
So I don't see a way back.
Guy, we're going to have to, again, we hit a break here, but we will continue this conversation over the weeks and months to come. Guy McPherson, Nature Bats Last is his blog, guymcpherson.com. Thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.